Just to do a quick round of introductions, Stephen, aka Destiny, we have Michael Shermer, Daniel Pinchbeck, James Fox, and myself. Could we just go quickly around the horn and just get an update from everyone? Like, what did you see the UAP hearing, and also just a quick bio? Maybe go James, Daniel, Michael.
I have to go first?
Yes.
My name's James Fox, and I became somewhat fascinated with the phenomenon in my mid-20s and decided to sort of dig into it a bit. And the more I dug in, the more I realized it was a rather complex issue, and I'm working on my 7th documentary right now, 30 years later.
And you did see the hearings?
Oh, so sorry. Yes, oh, yes. Okay. I watched the hearings very closely.
Daniel?
Yeah, my name is Daniel Pinchbeck. I'm the author of Breaking Open the Head, a book on psychedelic shamanism, 2012, the return of Quetzalcoatl, that was on the prophecies of various ancient and indigenous cultures. I also wrote a short book, The Occult Control System, looking at the UFO, alien abduction phenomenon. I'm at a conference in Costa Rica, so I didn't really have the opportunity to watch a lot of it. I watched a little bit, then I watched some highlights, and I've been following the story, obviously, all along.
Your microphone is a little soft. Is there anything to...
I can't do too much. I can just move the thing closer to my face.
Oh, okay. Am I the only one having a hard time hearing him?
He's decent.
I can hear him.
It's acceptable enough. Michael, who are you?
I am the publisher, Michael Shermer, publisher of this magazine, Skeptic Magazine. It's the quarterly publication of the Skeptic Society. We investigate all sorts of claims of the paranormal and supernatural and cults and conspiracies, and UFOs, alien abductions, UAPs have long been in our wheelhouse since we started in '92. So the UAP phenomena today is nothing new for us. We've been following this beat for a long time. Of course, I watched the whole 2 hours. And it fulfilled all my predictions that we would get nothing new. That is to say, the witnesses would repeat what they've been saying in the media and on podcasts. And I suppose the only value of it is that at least they did it under oath. And now maybe somebody, perhaps as high as Marco Rubio, will actually get in there to these locations where Grush said they are actually hiding this spacecraft and alien bodies. Okay, let's go. Let's check it out. So although I'm skeptical that we're being visited by aliens, it would be amazing and terrific and wonderful if we were and we had evidence for it. But I haven't seen any evidence yet. And eyewitness testimony is just the start. We actually, in science, need physical evidence, clear, unmistakable evidence.
Did you watch, Stephen?
Whoops, sorry. I caught a couple highlights. I saw that non-human biologics line, and there were a couple more, but I was mainly looking through articles for anything concrete, and it seems like nothing concrete has come out yet, so, yeah.
Well, I think what's concrete is that names were named, but unfortunately, we peasants don't get access to those names. Only certain members of Congress and various insiders, and so he says that he gave a whole list of military contractors' locations and names, which is real. I mean, it's like that. He submitted it to the Inspector General. So we'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
what they do.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
I've got a prediction.
Please.
I think one of the things that both Mr. Shermer and I have in common is that we're both going to be out of a job soon.
Why? What do you mean? I mean, if they actually disclose...
You're no longer going to be able to debunk them, and I'm going to no longer try to prove them. So
I don't want to debunk them. I just want to know what's true. And people say, what would you do in Skeptic if
I think I'll set my sights on, maybe climate change issues or something. I'm working on the transition already.
You're working on trans. What?
A transition.
Oh, transition. That's different. Yeah. No, I would just simply publish on the cover of Skeptic Magazine, they're real. We were wrong. I mean, there's nothing.
I've never interpreted you, Michael, as like skeptic for the sake of skeptic.
Yeah, that's right, because that's not a rational position to take. Skepticism is just asking for the evidence and adjusting your credence in the claim by the evidence. That's it. And, so far we just haven't seen anything. The equivalent of the Chinese spy balloon. That's my latest take on this. What would it take to convince you that these UAPs are real? Chinese spy balloon. When that story first broke, it wasn't clear what was going on. The photos were kind of blurry, taken far away. All right, what is this? And then within a few days, we had clear and unmistakable high-resolution photographs. Jets scrambled up there, took videos and photographs. You could clearly see what it was. And then the State Department, the Department of Defense, the President of the United States, all media covered it every day for the whole week. And then, the jets shoot it down. You can see the Navy ship scraping up the debris off the ocean. End of story. I mean, everybody knows that the Chinese spy balloon is real. Nobody's asking for the credentials of the pilots that saw the Chinese spy balloon. It doesn't matter what the credentials are. We can see it, right? So that's what it would take, something like that. And then that would end it. We would know for sure.
Ooh, what's that sound?
What sound?
Some sound just went kind of nuts.
I think somebody's doing a load of laundry right now.
But Stephen, I would recommend you and Daniel when you watch it. Yeah, the part. What's interesting is you have like AOC and Matt Getz, who are completely agreeing on getting the information, and like there's no hostility between them, whereas in other settings, other types of hearings, they would just be like yelling at each other. But it was, I think it's one of the most oddly bipartisan issues that exists.
I think I could be misremembered. Didn't Gates and AOC actually like joint present like a bill to reduce corruption in Congress like a year ago? Am I making that up? I feel like that was a thing.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So maybe they got like a pre-existing friendship. But I mean, there's probably a lot of people that just want more transparency in general. But my guess is it's probably coming at it more from a military angle, because I think a lot of people, maybe even most people, probably think that these are military applications that are being recovered, not extraterrestrial ones. So, I mean, obviously, more transparency around that is probably good for people in Congress, at least.
One of the things that always frustrates me is you've got two options right now, and first of all, saying what someone encounters, like David Fravor, and jumping to extraterrestrial immediately is just not. I agree with Michael Shermer on that, but for Michael Shermer to say there's nothing but anecdotal evidence when you've got radar returns, 4 sets of eyeballs, you've got FLIR footage of this Tic Tac object, also, like, that's not just anecdotal. I mean, they pretty much got everything except for shooting the thing down, right? That's very compelling evidence. Now, does it scream alien? No, it does not. But it does exhibit a technology that we can't seem to explain. It doesn't have any wings, doesn't have any exhaust vents, it doesn't have any visible means of propulsion, air disturbance. It stops, it accelerates from standstill to out of sight. It goes 80,000 feet straight up, back down in seconds or two. Like, okay, what is it? And if you look back to the 40s, you'll hear similar accounts from military police, military officers, military pilots describing the same thing. So either someone has been in possession of this technology for 75, 80 plus years, or it falls into that category of other. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that. But to say it's all anecdotal and there's nothing to it, that's just not accurate. But you can't jump. I understand your position. You can't jump to ET. I get it.
Well, here's how the astronaut and pilot Scott Kelly explained what he thinks is going on with what you just described. He told this to space.com yesterday. Take the gimbal UAP video, one of the most widely cited as evidence of off-world technology. According to Kelly, quote, "It looks to me like the FLIR, F-L-I-R, forward-looking infrared camera, is just reaching its gimbal limit." The gimbal is any kind of mount or support that allows an object such as a camera to rotate along an axis or multiple axes. And it's because it has gimbal limits. It turns 360 degrees in one direction, and whatever the limits are, it gets to that stop. It has to go back around the other way. And that's kind of what it looks like to me. Then they also quoted physicist Joshua Seemater at the Boston University Center for Space Physics, who analyzed the Go Fast video the other one you just described, who took the numbers off the perimeter of the video, did some basic trigonometry, and then from the information provided on the periphery of the video, determined the object was in fact only traveling at 40 miles an hour, not thousands of miles an hour. So here's what Kelly says about this in general. I remember one time I was flying in the warning areas off of Virginia Beach military operating area there. And my RIO, radar intercept officer, who was in the plane with him, was convinced we flew by a UFO. I didn't see it, so we turned around and went to go look at it. It turns out it was Bart Simpson, a balloon. Then Kelly adds, if you see something you know is an airplane, and you know generally how big airplanes are, you can tell relative distance. But when you have no reference points, whether it's in a plane or flying over the water, it's just really an environment that's really prone to optical illusions. And then he told the story when he was commanding the when he was commanding the space shuttle, and they had serviced the International Space Station, and now they were away from it. Anyway, his fellow astronaut said, "Oh, we left a tool and an instrument in the cargo bay. Look, you could see it floating there in the cargo bay." So they had this long discussion. Well, we got to go get it. Oh my gosh, how did this happen? And so on. And it turns out it was the International Space Station that was 80 miles away that they thought was in the cargo bay of the space shuttle. His point being, it's hard to tell what's going on, how big things are, how fast they're moving, how far away they are, and so on, when you don't have reference points. And his credentials are as good as great.
Can I say something, please? Because I'm boiling over with frustration right now. This is the same arguments, the same nonsense that's been going on for 80 years. Okay, so the United States Air Force investigated 12,618 cases, okay? Out of which 701 remained unexplained, not because of a lack of data, but because of a lack of any kind of conventional explanation. So what I'm saying is, yes, you are right. The vast majority of these things have a prosaic explanation. We don't give a shit about those ones. What about David Fravor? Give me an explanation to that one. What about the Colonel William T. Coleman, who had an up-close, 9-minute-long encounter with a flying saucer while piloting a B-25 bomber? Explain that one to me. Like, these are the ones that we care about. It's 5%, 10%, and I'm sorry to be frustrated, but Michael, like, I get it. I get that the vast majority of these things can be explained. We don't care about those. We don't care about weather balloons. We've been hearing about weather balloons since 1947. Chinese balloons, weather balloons, misidentified aircraft, weather phenomenon. Yes, it's all there. But we're talking about a small core that just can't. And that's what we care about. And that's where we have our sights.
I think the problem is that, like, if you've got some 10, 20, 30, 100,000 events, chances are there are always going to be a few that, for whatever reason, defy explanation. And I think it's fair to ask questions about, like, well, what are these things, or what could be causing these things? But it feels like people are a little bit too keen sometimes to jump to not only enemy military application, but extraterrestrial, just because there's going to be some percentage that we can't explain.
Well, even Grush doesn't say extraterrestrial, and that's what's kind of fascinating about some of his testimony. He won't really use that phrase. He prefers the NHI, non-human intelligence. Yeah.
The best thing to say, you guys, is like, hey, there's truly an observable physical phenomenon taking place that has been documented on all these different sensors. It's been photographed, it's been picked up on radar, it's been seen visually, and it is exhibiting a technology that we don't understand. And our fastest jets can't get near these things. And that's been so well documented for 80 years. We don't know what it is, and it merits further investigation.
So, and I have
Fair enough on that one. We can say that. But to talk about anecdotal and then give a bunch of silly explanations for stuff that's easy to explain, that's incredibly frustrating.
Well, the bombshell from the hearing, which hasn't, Black Vault discussed this a little bit, but Getz essentially leaked a classified Air Force briefing, which Burchett and Congresswoman Luna were denied access to, but Getz was, I guess his clearance enables him to get access. And he described the whole event of this formation of craft confronted by Air Force pilots, and then their radar got shut down while they were confronting it. So I definitely recommend people look up that clip of because I don't think he was supposed to say that in the hearing. That's what was being denied access. Daniel, what about you? Where do you land on this stuff?
Right. I mean, I'm more of like a philosopher of consciousness / explorer in a strange way. Like, I studied the crop circles for a few years. I think there's obviously whatever, if there is a phenomenon, it's choosing to maintain limit states, keep liminal. If it's absurd to think that we wouldn't know more at this point in some literal way. On the other hand, there is a phenomenon. So I think it's almost like it's hard for me to speak in this type of group setting in a way, because I would have to back up and talk about analytic idealism and this idea that maybe we're not living in a material and physical universe, we're living in a universe of consciousness, and this is also what a lot of the people who got into this phenomenon, like Jacques Vallée and so on, began to understand. And I had a number of weird experiences, like studying like the Greys, so on, like sort of telepathic weird experiences. I've had various sightings on sort of UFOs of at least like giant globes of light that were like hanging over, campsites in Utah and so on. So there's a phenomenon, but whatever is choosing to maintain itself outside of kind of the realm of rationality and reason, and that I think is part of the core aspect of the phenomenon.
Can you describe that dream that you had? I think you talked about it in 2012, where your partner woke up?
Yeah, you have a great memory. So when I was exploring the crop circles, which we could talk about a little bit, but then I got interested in the whole alien abduction saga, and I started studying that in depth. They began to sort of infiltrate in my dreams. And one night I had a dream where and I was really studying my dreams then. I was doing all these like Tibetan like dream yoga practices. So in the dream, we met like an alien group, and there was this alien woman commander, and at a certain point, she opened my mouth with one of her hands, and she put her fingers into my mouth with her other hand. And I did the same thing with her. Then I woke up from the dream, and it's like, that was super creepy and weird. What the hell was that? And my partner, in deep sleep, turned over and opened my mouth with one of her hands and put a finger in my mouth with her other hand.
Whoa.
So I got a lot of experiences like that, where there was some kind of like crossing over, the psychic framework seemed kind of permeable. And also, like, the more I studied it, the more there were kind of like creepy, like, noises at night, like hummings, kind of like I felt like I was, by focusing on this thing, I was like sort of bringing it into my frame of reference in a way. And it was like lurking at the edges, So, yeah, I don't know. It's just like I think we get trapped in this, and I know particularly when it comes to like the military and this type of hearing, this evidence-based search for something. Somehow, I don't think it's ever going to reveal itself like that. I don't think there's going to be a big reveal here where it's like, oh, we've got the craft and the alien bodies. I just don't see it going like that. I think it's almost like Schrodinger's cat or something. It's something that has in its nature this part of its nature is this like liminality, in a way.
Yeah, I love that. That's like Jung's book on UFOs.
Exactly.
I think there's something to that, really. It's the living in the liminal stages, as you put it, interstices of human society. I think that's probably true, but the UAP group, they're not comfortable with that anymore than telling Christians that the resurrection is mythologically true but didn't really happen. That they're not buying that. It had to really happen. And for UAP people, this is not mythic. It is, we are actually being visited by aliens, or the Russians or Chinese have some super advanced physics that we don't know about, something like that.
Isn't it insane the language they're putting into the NDAA though? I mean, James, can you talk about some of this language? There's like a whole lexicon around it with.
Well, this is, I read this before, but this is the part of the UAP amendment. And this was signed into law at the end of 2022. But this is, they were onto something then, and that is any activity or program by a department or agency of the federal government or contractor of such a department or agency related to unidentified anomalous phenomenon, including with respect to material retrieval, material analysis, reverse engineering, research and development, detection and tracking, development or operational testing. It's like they kind of saw this coming, and then they got the protections for the the individuals making unauthorized disclosures shall not be subject to a non-disclosure agreement entered into by the individual or makes the disclosure. So they knew there were people queuing up in the intelligence agencies that want the general public to know what's going on, that want to reveal where the evidence is. And I think we saw a couple of days ago the culmination of that. And the claims made by Mr. Grush are so potentially paradigm shifting, so significant, that we have to call his bluff. We have to follow every lead, every breadcrumb. I'm told by some intel folks that I'm in touch with that there are firsthand witnesses watching to see how things go for David Grush, and they're on the verge of coming forward, and they know exactly where these programs are taking place and where these crafts are being kept.
Does anyone happen to know why the whistleblower laws we have on the books won't protect these eyewitnesses? Or why they think it won't?
I don't know. There's a process. I think they have to go to because I just talked to an intel guy yesterday who's about to go to the ICIG and start that process. And once you go through that process, it has to be approved. Then the parameters of what they can share publicly will be approved, and then they've got this protection. And I know a couple of them that are doing that now.
I think it's not that existing whistleblower protection laws would be at all helpful, but I think that people want more explicit types of protections related to, just with more explicit language. I think that they need to go even further, to be honest. I think that they need to take it as far as declaring amnesty for all of these people who have potentially been breaking the law by shielding information from Congress and funneling funds, through various, like they described in the hearings, that there's kind of this process that they use to funnel funds. I think all those people need to just be given amnesty, because the problem is there's going to be this constant resistance to bringing information forward if everybody's scared that they're going to go to jail. So, Daniel.
I guess I wanted to also, more in my particular way of looking at this, which isn't very specific around like the witness and all this sort of stuff. But I find it a little bit interesting that this is happening during the week of like the most intense, global warming in history. We're learning that we've kind of overshot, that even the kind of what climate scientists were saying a number of years ago, like that it's gone way over, what was predicted. All around the world, we're seeing like massive temperature variations. If you go into, as I did in great depth, like if you read David Jacobs, The Threat, like all these people who studied and kind of took seriously, I mean, some of them were more negative, some of them was more positive. David Jacobs was a hypnotherapist who began to talk to all these clients who have these ideas of alien abduction and remembered very visible, very, very intense kind of experiences under hypnosis. And a lot of times they were brought in these crafts, and they were shown these films of like the Earth going through like a Holocaust, and then these sort of hybrid human aliens being all that's left, and them being kind of like walking around. They were shown, some of them apparently were taught how to like fly these saucers, and were told that someday there's going to be this massive event on the Earth, and they'll come and scoop in all these people and bring them to some other planet or something like that. There is this sense, just as a concept, that this other, which may also be another shadow aspect of ourselves or some kind of projection, has its own kind of weird agenda. And that agenda, if you read some things like, Communion or particularly David Jacobs' work or other, there's a sense that it's not a very nice trajectory, in terms of our interests, our human, kind of development or something. But it does feel very, in terms of this counter narrative, which you can also track through the crop circles, going back to the 2001 ones that showed like an answer to the one that we sent out into space. The Arecibo response, which showed like the little alien instead of a human and so on. So it does feel like there's a narrative unfolding in some strange way that supports kind of this sort of David Jacobs threat idea. And it's sort of interesting to me, synchronistically, that this revealing or this semi-disclosure or whatever is happening, during the worst climate, week in history.
Did you see Daniel? Right? Did you see the 1994 Rua Zimbabwe case with the children and Dr. John Mack? That was so fascinating to me, because to hear all those children describing the message that they reportedly received.
Yeah, that's one of the most convincing cases on record.
I remember trying to get funding to do that as part of the film, The Phenomenon. I don't know, if Michael, if you've seen The Phenomenon or not.
I have, yeah. I saw
you
it.
have. So
I love your films.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that end scene. And I'm sorry if I came across a little abrasive earlier, but I'm just so frustrated with like people putting words in my mouth, or like it's just beyond. I've had it. But in any case, that message that the children reported is just. I remember trying to talk my then investor into flying all these witnesses in, finding them, hunting them down, paying for.
I think there's a film happening around those kids, actually.
Yeah, Ariel School. I was working with Randall Nickerson at the time as well, but and I actually heard about the case, believe it or not, from Steven Spielberg. And
but the message they got was also around protect the earth.
Yeah, that we're not being good stewards, and we're not, But what I was going to say about it is that I was trying to get funding from this potential investor, and he's like, I'm not going to waste a dime on a UFO landing in Africa, at a school in Africa. No way did that happen. It can't be, therefore it isn't. And I said, just look at the tapes of the children being interviewed that John Mack took. And so I showed those tapes to this investor, and he was deeply moved, and he changed his course on it. And that's how we ultimately got the funding, and with the help of Randall Nickerson, found the witnesses, flew them in from all different corners of the world, and got them to talk about it 20 years later.
Yeah, I mean, a common idea in sort of, kind of like the more like psychedelic edge of thinking about this phenomena is that, rather than it being sort of extraterrestrial, there's some like physical other planet, maybe it's more interdimensional.
Yeah,
and so they're playing with our causality, our notions of time and space in some way, and maybe they're kind of weaving in, this narrative in a very cunning way to get us prepared for some type of like catastrophic event where they sort of have this agenda or something. And that's, somehow implied in these other weird narratives. If you look at the abduction accounts and all that stuff.
We also assume that there's sort of like uniformity in like whoever they are, but in reality, they would more likely be pretty diverse in terms of like many different types and whatnot. But
yeah, that's the other thing, because the ones that, taking the abduction accounts, whatever grain of seriousness you want to, but I mean, they're kind of like they don't seem like a highly developed alternative society. They like have no culture whatsoever. They're living in this sort of like empty space. They're like void beings. They're like demons or something.
Well, that's the funny thing. It's because like they're so advanced, but yet they're crashing all the time.
Well, they're obviously not crashing all the time. If they are crashing, if we have recovered alien ships and EBEs, I would be quite certain that they did that on purpose to build some kind of rapport with us. I mean, if that's real, which, quote unquote real, whatever quote unquote real
Daniel,
is.
what if, I love all this take on it, but what if the they is us, like religion?
Sure.
The gods are real inside people's heads, but not out there, and that they have real effects on people's lives and society and cultures and so on.
Yeah, I mean, a book that I really heartily recommend is this book by this guy, Patrick Harper, called The Philosopher's Secret Fire. And he talks about even this idea of literality and kind of the, dualistic, logic of a real and a non-real that we have is not something you find in a lot of indigenous societies. And they may have actually had, different types of experiences. Their reality may have allowed for more permeable psychic effects and so on. So yeah, I mean, we may have over concretized our way of understanding or being in reality, and that may be feeding back, negative feedback loops on us in some strange ways.
Yeah.
Does anybody know how old the Wandjina art? I guess it was. They were described as the Wandjina from the Aboriginals in Australia. I want to say 5,000 years ago on cave walls. Has anybody seen those?
I'm not sure about those.
So I was in Africa investigating that alleged landing at Ruism at Ariel School, and the now headmistress Judy Bates had kept the drawings from the children of what they saw. And so I had it fresh in my head, and I went from Africa to Australia, and I investigated a landing case in Australia, again at a school, Westall Primary School in 1966. And while I was there, I was sharing some of this imagery of the so-called, beings that the children described and drew. And the Australians were like, oh my gosh, you got to see the Wangina and the K part that's 5,000 years old. And they were showing them to me, and the parallels.
How do you spell Wangina? I'll give it a look up.
Wangina, I think it's Wangjina, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, it was quite remarkable. These big eyes, sort of almond shaped. It was quite remarkable that just the similarities.
I just find it fascinating that this topic, it's like when you compare it to like typical culture war type topics, it's like it exists outside, and then there's this anomaly where like, okay, yeah, everybody wants transparency, and we're all just sitting here twiddling our thumbs waiting for transparency. And luckily there's some politicians who are starting to put legislation for transparency together. But like, Stephen, I'm curious how like you see that, because you seem sort of like non-passionate about this issue.
I feel like there are a lot of I don't want to call them logical or common sense questions, because those are stupid terms. But I guess like the biggest questions I always have come down to, there's a very human constructed question. Like, if somebody could travel faster than light, the idea of them not being able to navigate in our atmosphere and crashing seems a little bit absurd to me. If they were trying to communicate with us in some way, I feel like there are a bajillion ways better that they could communicate with us than crashing obscure spacecraft and hoping some governments procure the right things and then disseminate that information in the best way. That just seems like
crop circles.
Yeah, or crop circles.
Yeah, I can make a counter argument if you want.
Yeah, go for it. If you don't want to, sure. Well, I'll say real quick. A third thing too would be that I oh god, I had a third thing, but I lost it. Go for it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the crop circles are a genius method of communication. I mean, also, remembering that I think it's somehow my experience of it was that it's almost like a teaching, on the nature of reality and the nature of consciousness itself, even in terms of causality, because it's extremely difficult to determine.
Well, but what have we learned from a crop circle?
Well, I mean, I wrote about 100 pages of it in this 2012 book. I tried to formalize it. I mean, I think they're indicating a number of things.
Can you give me one of those things?
Yeah, well, what is the relationship between ancient esoteric knowledge systems and modern scientific discoveries? So, for instance, a lot of them use fractals, which were also based on like phi-based ratios. There was Gerald Hawkins was a professor of astronomy from Boston University who was looking at the earlier formations, and he found kind of new Euclidean paradigms that Euclid had never discovered and no human geometer had ever found. And he created a contest in a science magazine for people could help find these patterns they weren't able to.
I'll challenge you on those things. I can take a lot of mushrooms and see fractals. I don't need crop circles for that. I don't think we've actually gleaned knowledge from, or I've never heard of in fields of math, physics, chemistry. I've never heard of somebody saying there was a problem in science or there was a problem with quantum mechanics, but the crop circle unlocked this answer for us. I don't know if that view is supported by anybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they're pointing towards a different approach to knowledge. Let's say, I mean, where you see it's once again when you just say that, it's kind of like this very literal approach to the alien phenomenon. It's like it has to be real. We have to have something tangible that we get from it. I mean, maybe we already have everything that we need, but we're sort of out of a way of knowing that would allow us to make coherent sense of the cosmos around us. So understanding the relationship between ancient geometry, kind of esoteric uses of ancient geometry and modern, scientific understandings of fractals, which were only discovered in 1979, right, with the Mandelbrot set.
Sure, I understand that. But I mean, there are also people that drop peanut butter and jelly toast on the floor and then think the image of God appears when they pick it up. I don't see the. I just don't think there's a very compelling argument that there's some communication going on. Like, could it be some other non-causal way of thinking and some non-Euclidean space? Like, it's possible, but like anything could be that, right?
No, not exactly. But I mean, I think part of it is that it's a message that's put in such a way, like it's an interesting form of messaging. Like you have to think about why that form of messaging, right? Because it's like, it's a public sign system. It's not copyrightable. The government can't, close it down, so they created, a kind of, long series, if you take the hypothesis that they're not man-made, that some other agency is making them, then somebody went to the trouble of, over many decades, creating a sign and symbol system that, falls outside of the parameters of what can be like copyrighted or privately owned or whatever.
Yeah, but like imagine how cool it would have been. What if they made those same crop circles on the moon? Then we would know for sure that it was something extraterrestrial, and wouldn't we be wondering, all day if it was a bunch of people on planet Earth?
Obviously, it's not a situation where whoever, let's say there is another agency doing this, then part of the puzzle is it's not meant to be known. I mean, if they were this, they could put it on the top of the White House or something. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like the part of it is the individual human being's freedom of choice to explore or expand their consciousness in certain ways.
Sure, and I can understand that, but I mean, at this point, it's where we've entered divine territory. Like, I can't imagine, I'm imagining George W. Bush giving a speech about how we're going to go and make ourselves known to an alien presence, but we don't want to be too known, but we want to leave something so that we're kind of testing them, but they need to have some faith that it's just
Sure, but let's destiny. So one idea would be think about if we were anthropologists now and we encountered an uncontacted tribe in the jungle. 50 years ago, we would have just jumped in there. We'd have tried to convert them to Christianity, and that would have been it. The tribe, or you land your helicopter, and the whole integrity of the community is completely decimated forever. So here, let's say they see us as an evolving form of consciousness that has problems, but also possibilities. They don't. Now, if we were anthropologists, we found that pristine uncontacted tribe, we would probably go in and leave a hammer, or a carved stone, and then maybe 10 years later we would go back. We would leave something else, a page of a book or an illustration. So over a considerable period of time, we would allow for their culture to adapt and assimilate and absorb rather than just being annihilated. So I think it could be something like that.
They could also look at us and think, well, there's no sign of intelligent life here. We're destroying our planet and killing each other. I mean,
like the day the Earth stood still.
That's true. I actually heard that they were just about to establish communications, and they saw Elon Musk rebrand Twitter to X, and now they've just completely left our planet.
We can't even get along with each other, let alone,
Does that idea resonate with you as a possibility, Stephen?
I mean, everything you said, I think, is good, but I think the analogies that you're giving, I think, defeat the analogy of the crop circle. Like leaving behind a tool or a page or some discernible knowledge. I felt like we were communicating with another species. The first thing we would try to do is learn the language. I think that would be step one. It wouldn't be, let's write things in English and hope that somehow they can decipher the writing. It would be, let's figure out how they communicate with each other. And then we try to leave behind useful tidbits of knowledge. But yeah, I think kind of going along with the crop circle thing, I think another thing that kind of hurts is something that I would have expected to happen. Well, I think it's sort of skeptical, but real quick, if we saw all these alien sightings in Roswell and throughout the early 1900s, mid 1900s, etc., why is it, if these things are happening, why didn't the advent of the cell phone increase 1,000,000-fold these types of sightings? I would expect to see UFOs, Bigfoots everywhere, but that didn't happen.
Yeah. I agree with that, but once again, I think
hold on.
Yeah.
Let me comment on that one, please.
Okay.
That's my territory.
Yeah, go for it.
There are so many images. It's flooded with images. I get 20 images from cell phones hourly, okay? The problem is deciphering it. They're so much easier to fake nowadays. You don't know what's real and what's not. And unless you have a mass sighting, which there have been some, if you had another event like the 1997 Phoenix, Arizona case, March 13th, today, we would have lots of footage, okay? So obviously we're waiting for an event like that to take place. We had the event at O'Hare Airport in 2006, I believe that was, where it hovered, according to witnesses, a disc-shaped craft hovered over. There was apparently 1 or 2 photographs taken of that from one of the United Airlines pilots, but that's yet to reveal itself. So the problem is there's so much of it, it's just hard to prove one way or the other. Do you know what I mean? It'd be a full.
Yeah, but the cream would rise to the top very quickly, right?
So I have right now in my possession in that studio behind you, probably 6 hours of the most incredible footage I've ever seen in my life that's going to go into my next film, okay? I kind of call it eye candy, and I've got a production facility in Hollywood. This is stuff I collected all over. I have a production facility in Hollywood that's going to analyze it for me and break it down and do their best to determine if it seems to come from, software or if it's legitimate. And that's the best I can do. So to answer your question, there is lots of footage. I have footage right now that's crystal clear, broad daylight of a disc flying overhead. It's so unbelievable. I just go, this can't possibly be real, but maybe it is. Let me go have it analyzed. So there's lots of footage out there.
And that's why chain of custody is like really
Very
important, particularly with the government. And that's why some of the Air Force footage is important, and because it's coming from a very known place. Daniel.
But I sort of agree with Stephen that it is kind of surprising, given all of that it's still sort of murky. But I guess my feeling is more that this is something that's sort of an emergent phenomena within consciousness itself in a strange way, and it's sort of a mystery that shields and hides and protects itself in some complex ways. And we see the same thing in like investigations of psychic phenomena, like Dean Radin. There's like the first time they do an experiment, there might be like a very high correlation, of some psychic effect, like telekinesis or something. But then after that, it drops down to almost zero. So it's almost like there's something in the realm of psychic and supernatural or ET phenomena, whatever it's called, that wants to sort of protect itself in some strange way or hide itself.
James, can you speak a little bit to like the physicality of the evidence, in Virginia, and like just how, like you mentioned how it just left this imprint on the whole city, which is like very tangible. Can you just kind of talk about like how you see physical evidence working in the Virginia case?
Well, so I'm quite confident that we're going to come up. I don't know if any of you here have seen Moment of Contact. It's a case that happened in 1996 in Virginia. And I'll start off quickly by saying that I was working on my second documentary out of the blue. It was in very preliminary stages. We were just sort of taking broad strokes. It was the late 90s on some of the cases that we would potentially be covering. And I had partnered up with a couple of people. One was this guy Boris, and for my second time, and another guy was a British reporter by the name of Tim Coleman. Very bright guy, articulate, private school educated, mainstream journalist. And he said, "Hey, I'll remind you guys that I was working on my second UFO documentary." Okay, so obviously I believe in UFOs, and this guy says, the guy that I just recently teamed up with, "Oh, mate, we've got to cover this alleged crash that happened in Varginha, Brazil." I looked at him, "What?" He said, "Yeah, and the aliens were walking through the town, and they got." And I thought to myself, "Okay, I just partnered with the wrong guy. I'm gonna have to just this guy's nuts." And I didn't look into it for 10 years, but I'll fast forward. I did actually start looking into it on a trip to Brazil back in 2011, and I started meeting some witnesses, and I thought, oh, maybe there is something here. And then I went back 5 times, and spanning the better part of 12 years. And it's in the culture of the town. I mean, the population, I think, of Varginha was like over 100,000, and almost everyone you talk to either knows someone who had an experience or had an experience themselves. They've got statues in the town. It's quite remarkable. Something truly extraordinary took place in Varginha, Brazil. And I think that obviously we all want the photographic evidence. I've identified 5 different sources. We're going after it. But when that comes out, and I'm sure it will, it's just a matter of time, that will be debunked, of course, right? Because it can't be. It's like if you had the definitive piece of videotaped evidence. I mean, there were very compelling photographs taken in the 40s and 50s. very good, broad daylight, crystal clear. But that would prove if you said this is a legitimate picture, that would prove it's real. So the footage of the alleged aliens is probably going to come out, and when it does, it too will be debunked.
Yeah.
By the vast majority.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, even with
we're trying to go after it anyway.
Yeah, and with the Phoenix Lights, I mean, certainly something was there. You can see it. That's even on the old cameras back then. And the governor, Fife Symington, fully, he thinks that it was from somewhere else. And not that doesn't mean that it's not some government craft or something, but like this meme that is going around like, oh, we would have footage, or like we would have, like there are dozens and dozens of super credible pieces of media about it. And I mean, James, you would probably say far more than that, but
yeah, I mean, I investigated that sighting in the 90s, and I was going back and forth to Phoenix for 10 years. I covered it in several films. I developed a relationship. I was the one that got Fife Symington, the former governor of Arizona, to come forward. And to my absolute astonishment, he admitted on camera for the first time that he too was a witness. And then he made the determination, just because of the sheer size of this object, that he's also a captain. He was a captain in the Air Force. He's a pilot. That it was otherworldly just because of the size, and that he made inquiries to the Pentagon, Luke Air Force Base, DOD, and they shrugged their shoulders and told him they don't know what it was.
I just feel like everybody needs to pause for a second in the country and, even world, arguably, because of this hearing just happened and like these explosive allegations. Like, let's just stop with all of the other culture war nonsense and just get to the bottom of this and get, go to the facilities that Grush is talking about. Michael, maybe they can take you with them. And,
well, I'd love to go, but
because it's really frustrating that it like passes over and you see it's like, okay, it happened and people sort of forget about it. I know people are still working on it really hard, but it's just
I can imagine a scenario like the following. Say somebody like Marco Rubio gets access to these facilities. He goes in there and they show him, and it's some super advanced DARPA project, the equivalent of the U-2 spy plane or the SR-71 Blackbird or the stealth bomber or something like that, whatever the next generation is. And he goes, oh, I see, this is ours. And it's highly classified, top secret. Of course, you can't go out there and tell everybody what you saw, because then the Russians and Chinese will know what we have. Oh, yeah, okay. So then he comes back and goes, well, I checked it out, folks, and there was nothing for me to report. Now, of course, this is just going to frustrate everybody, but what if it's just that? What if it's just our own technology?
No, that's not what's going to happen. I'll tell you what's going to happen. Rubio has met with firsthand witnesses. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, he said so.
Yeah, so I knew that before he even said so.
Okay.
So Rubio knows they cannot leave these claims. They have to follow up all the way through with this. I realized for the first time in 30 years, this is one of the reasons why I had tears flowing down my face, because I've been laughed at and mocked and ridiculed, and I held my ground for all this time, is that I realized they cannot put the paste back in the tube this time.
Who's the they?
Well, there are people that don't want this out, I can assure you.
Well, actually, in terms of who's they, I mean, Grush alleged in the hearing that there was a group of sort of a hybrid group of government, lifetime bureaucrats and private corporation executives. That was the allegation in the
Let's say,
hearing.
here's a really good question. Let's say that's true. Let's look at the incentives. Why would Russia or China or North Korea or Iran, that does cyber, warfare against us all the time, why wouldn't they be exposing this to make the U.S. look bad?
Exposing
totally.
what?
The first country to expose it is going to be.
Sorry, when you say expose it, what are you talking about? The
expose
phenomenon?
that people in the United States government or private sector are, trying to cover up a story of this magnitude from the public.
Well, so they're doing the same thing in their countries. How do I know that? Well, I've been there. I went to Russia, I went to China, I went to Africa, I went to South America, all across Europe. I met with generals in all those places, except for Africa. And the problem is, and this is something that people just don't realize, you can't admit when you're in charge, you're the power, you're supposed to be in control, that you have unidentified objects. whizzing around with impunity in our airspace, and that shall they turn out to be hostile, you have no visible means of defense against them. You don't know who they are, where they come from, what they want. I can assure you, no governing authority wants to admit that to the general public because it exposes their weaknesses and their vulnerabilities. And that's the primary reason for secrecy. And
I do want to mention, we've had a few, like we had that Hayam Eshed, right, from Israel.
Just like, even if you don't believe it, like
Minister of Defense.
Yeah, if you could suspend judgment for, like, I ask you, Michael or Destiny, if you guys could suspend judgment for a moment and just, like, okay, let's just pretend that it's real, okay? Let's just pretend that the UFOs are real. It's a global phenomenon. They're exhibiting a technology we don't understand. They don't have any wings. They fly rings around our fastest jets. We have definitive proof this is going on, but we don't have any more answers than that, okay? Now, if that were true, do you think the people that we put in charge to defend us and protect us, that they want to come forward and disclose that information to us? Do you think?
I think one.
Thanks, Daniel, for coming. Where can people find you?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, both Daniel and Michael. I'll come back to you soon. They both have to leave like right now, so I just want them to. I want them to both just plug.
I have 2 minutes.
Okay,
All right, go for it.
Daniel. Where can people find you? Because you got to.
Well, my Substack, danielpinchbeck.substack.com, and courses on liminal news. Actually, I did a course around UFOs and ETs with a professor, which is on that site. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Happy to do more on this topic.
Thanks,
and
man.
Great to meet everybody. And also, my email is daniel.pinchbeck@gmail.com if anybody wants to stay in touch.
Bye, Daniel.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Have fun.
Michael.
Just a few final thoughts, kind of reflecting on the whole thing. Because we deal with so many different controversial topics in Skeptic, there's always this, what's called the problem of residuals. That is, there's always a residual of unexplained phenomenon in any field, not just UFOs and UAPs, but physics. Why can we not unify, quantum physics and general relativity? And there's all these anomalies, and so these string theory. People fight amongst themselves. And I spent 4 hours on Joe Rogan's show with Graham Hancock, and he's got a laundry list of these unexplained anomalies. If you go to the Great Pyramid, and there's the Sphinx, and there's this weathering that geologists can't explain on the one side, could be older, and so on. And he's got 100 like that. And when you look into them, archaeologists can't always explain them. So what do you do with the unexplained anomalies? And I could go on and on. RFK Jr. talks about anomalies in the vaccine system, or climate skeptics say, "Oh no, the data set that the climate scientists use is flawed because of this anomaly or that." All right, so we're always going to have to live with these anomalies, and in science, that's just the way it goes. No theory explains everything. All we can do is just kind of hope we get the model we have explains the most phenomenon, recognizing we can't explain everything, and we just have to continue. Now, it could be the whole paradigm is wrong. The theory of evolution doesn't explain everything, Darwinian, neo-Darwinian, and so on and so forth. But there's always somebody out there going, hey, what about this one thing right there? You Darwinians can't explain that. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, then you come up with something better. And, that's just sort of how it goes. And we just have to live with that. And the whole point of the hearings, was to try to close up as many of those anomalies as we can. But I'm not at all convinced that this will shut the door. If, the Tic Tac video, it turns out it was X. There's always going to be 100 others. James has 1,000 in his back pocket there. Yeah, but what about this one? And we may have to just live with that uncertainty. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, I agree. Everything won't always be able to be explained. Like, we're going to find bones that we can't identify. We're going to find things that are going to be impossible to date. And yeah, those will accumulate over time. But I think rather than... the problem I have is that instead of putting a question mark over things, people always want to put it all kind of in one box, basically. Mm-hmm. That there's 10 unidentified things, and every single unidentified thing is actually getting you closer to some other truth that actually has zero evidence for it, because the only evidence for this other thing are all the things in the question mark box, which don't point in a direction, in my opinion.
Yep, good point. All right, bye everybody.
Bye, Michael.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Michael's didn't he say he's gonna do the front cover of his magazine? They're here, or we've got him. What was that?
Yeah, he wants to. So you're going to hold him to that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So James, you think this is like we just broke through?
Oh, no question. No question. No question. None. I've never said this before because I could see the look on all the senators and congressmen and knowing David Grush is under oath and his credentials, he said, I'll show you where they are. I know where they are. Like, how are you not going to call his bluff on that? This is coming out. How do I know this? I've also went to Washington for almost 5 weeks, just a couple months ago, and I met with a lot of the people that are working behind the scenes to get this out. They know that it's real, okay? It's just now it's a matter of how do we roll this out? And there is a lot of talking behind the scenes. I can assure you this is coming out, and you just wait. When some high resolution satellite imagery leaks out, that will be happening. Firsthand witnesses are going to come forward. That will be happening. They can't put the genie back in the bottle, man. This is coming out.
And because he was under oath and he stated that he submitted names of individuals that are actively working in these special access programs, it would be so easy for them, if he's lying or wrong, to prove that he was wrong and completely ruin his reputation. So it's like they should just do that. Like, they either have to destroy Grush's reputation somehow, which they haven't done yet, or they need to, tell us what happened when they
What do you do though if they are at the area where they go and they investigate and it's like, this is the SR 79XX, and like I can't reveal anything, and then you're just back at square one, right? Where it's like, well,
I mean, at this point they have to tell us if it's secret tech. I mean,
that's not going to happen.
They would never do that. Yeah.
The ICE, I'd say Intelligence Community Inspector General Thomas Monheim. That's the guy right now the media needs to be going after. We need to get statements from him. He was provided the locations, the names of the programs, the people directly involved with the programs, the firsthand witnesses of the programs, and it's only a matter of time until we get statements from him. This stuff's coming out. I've never said this before. I have never believed that I thought this was going to happen. I really didn't. It's coming out now, and there's no turning back.
Nah, I don't think so. I think in 1 year from now, they're going to be the exact same spot we were in 1 year ago.
Nope. I'll bet you $1,000.
If you want, I'll do it. I'll give you. Yeah, we'll do it if you really want to. If you sanction this, if you want to sanction this bet.
Well, yeah, I'd gladly. And that'll be a nice dinner too. I'll get some caviar, some champagne. I might do like Chateau Lafite, maybe. I don't know. We'll figure. I'll do.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Actually, Michael did a similar bet, which I called, which was he said that it's $1,000 if it comes out by the end of 2025.
Well,
what are we saying? Yeah, what are we saying officially is coming out? Like evidence for extraterrestrial,
okay, so I think within a year, you're going to be hearing from first-hand witnesses, not second-hand witnesses. There's going to be additional people coming forward confirming David Grush's claims. And there's going to be more evidence leaking out, like photographic evidence, things of that nature.
Absolutely. Well, so here's the thing. This is how these bets are always difficult. Yeah, there could be photographic evidence, but it's going to be like a blurry picture in a hangar of a plane that doesn't seem to match any current planes. And then we're going to get into an argument where I'm going to say, well, obviously it's a Lockheed Martin project. And you're going to say, obviously it's a UFO from extraterrestrial origin. And then we're going to be back at, because that's how it always seems to go. Yeah.
I'm curious, Destiny, because I've been following this closely, as you know. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, does this story matter to you?
If extraterrestrial anything was, even if we found a single-celled organism on Mars, I think it would be the most important discovery in all of human history. The idea that life could start on other planets, it would be the single more important than discovering fire. Yeah, so I think it would be. I just don't think it's very. Yeah, I don't think it's very compelling evidence for it. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Because some people don't. And Destiny, I'm just curious. How many military pilots have you interviewed?
None so far.
How many generals have you interviewed?
4 stars.
Yes, anybody, and just generals in
None so far.
none. How many first-hand witnesses have you interviewed?
None yet.
None yet. Okay. And how many documents have you seen from the government? Have you ever gone to the National Archives and dug through Project Blue Book files?
Not that I'm at liberty to discuss. No.
We'll have to do that in a skiff.
No, but seriously.
So I'm just curious. So you've done zero research. You consider this to be one of the most significant stories of our time, and yet you've done not a single shred of research, and you're dismissing it because you've read from the mainstream media that it doesn't exist?
I mean, it's a combination of a priori assumptions. So one being that faster than light travel aliens the communication would be on a whole other level, right? Because they have shifted their paradigm and understanding of science multiple times, right? Because it seems like our understanding around us, we can never even travel faster than the speed of light, which automatically puts us out of reach of basically ever communicating another star system with another habitable planet, right? So we're already right off the bat, alien.
But hold on.
Okay.
But Destiny, you're speculating. We have no idea where they come from.
Yeah.
How do you know that they're interdimensional? They're not interdimensional.
Sure, they could be. Yeah, they could be. They could be all of these things.
We don't know.
I don't know. But I have a very hard time believing that if they were to come from another dimension, from faster than light travel, from the dark side of our consciousness, that their number one objective would be to run around bending crops in Nebraskan, cornfields. But
I'm not saying that.
I also don't think they would be crashing their spaceships into the ground.
Well, maybe we're shooting them down.
Well, James, what do you actually think? Like, why are they crashing? Do you are these just like probes? Like,
so I can't speak on crashes other than two. Okay, and these two, I've done extensive research. I've gone to Roswell multiple times. I went to the 50th anniversary, and the one distinct advantage of the 50th anniversary of Roswell, it was a lot of attention was happening. There were press releases about it. Roswell there was the congressman at the time. I'll think of his name, Stephen Schiff. And he was talking about the fact that he wasn't able to get access. President Clinton was making inquiries. It was a big deal. The reason why I want to say this is because I went there and I got to meet a number of firsthand witnesses in Roswell. It was that golden period where they were all just about to die. And I got to talk to them, and I got to meet the people that handled the debris in their hands. I got to meet people that were at the crash site. I got to meet people that were involved in the story. It was amazing. And they think there was a thunderstorm. So there was speculation as to how it crashed. There was a massive thunderstorm. There's also, I interviewed a colonel who said that our new radar systems interfered with their navigation. I don't know, it's speculation, I don't know. But that was a very compelling case. Then the other case I did was the Varginha case. And the witnesses, and I'm just telling you what the witnesses said, I don't know, I wasn't there. But they said that this cigar-shaped object had a gash in the side of it. Now, how did it get that gash? They all said the same thing. It had a gash and it had this weird white vapor coming out of it. And it was an aluminum cigar-shaped object that was in distress for hours before it collided with the ground. How did it get that gash? Did a meteor hit it? Did it get struck by something from us? I don't know. I don't know. But according to the witnesses, it had a gash. So you can only speculate after that. So I don't know, and I don't know where they came from. I just don't have those answers. But I can tell you that the military themselves did the classification of close encounters of the first, second, and third kind decades and decades and decades ago. In other words, they've established a classification system for different encounters. Close encounter of the first kind is when someone has a close encounter with an object they can't explain, right? UFO. Close encounter of the second kind is when, and this is not coming from me, this is coming from our own military. Close encounter of the second kind is when the object that is being witnessed interferes or interacts with the environment somehow, whether it leaves imprints on the ground, picked up by radar, photographed. Remember Richard Dreyfuss's face being burned in Close Encounters? Close encounter of the third kind, is when the witness claims entities associated with the craft. So that was established from reports back in the as early as the 1950s. So there have been credible observations from credible witnesses of close encounters of the third kind occupants made. So we have that connection. It's not just objects in the sky. We have reports, credible reports of beings on the ground.
And those classifications, where is that cited?
Oh, it's in Project Blue Book files.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can investigate one of the most compelling cases in U.S. history. Happened in 1964 with a police officer by the name of Lonnie Zamora. And I interviewed his family, his wife. I went to the National Archives, his co-workers. I spent 5 years investigating that case. I went to the National Archives and got never before seen documentation of that, footprints of the creatures corresponding with the landing pads. It's a fascinating case.
Stephen, why do you think that in Roswell, for instance, they would have first, because there's the famous headline of them admitting there was a flying saucer and then they retracted it. Don't you find that a little bit bizarre?
No. I mean, it could have been an error in reporting. It could have been they genuinely thought something. It could have been somebody said something dumb to somebody else. But
well, James knows exactly what happened.
Tell me.
With that flow of events,
Go
right?
ahead. Roswell was what? How long ago was this?
1947,
70,
July.
80? Okay, so about 80 years ago? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, James, what was the flow of events with the first front page headline that it was a flying saucer and then the changing their story?
So there was a rash of UFO reports. If you look back starting in June with the pilot Kenneth Arnold, where he saw a string of unidentified objects while piloting his plane. I think it was Mount Rainier? I'd have to look that up. Oregon. In any case, that made headline news. It was a huge story. They were all on the hunt. There was no ridicule about it. I was like, we'll get to the bottom of it. Perhaps it's some super stealth, military project. You could go to any archive and you'll see on the headline, front page of every newspaper during that time was reports of these so-called flying saucers. And I believe there was even a reward. And this guy, Mac Brazel in Roswell, just outside Roswell, New Mexico, Mac Brazel, who's a rancher, came in with pieces of this debris to the 509th. I think he went to the police, and they ultimately sent him to the 509th Bomb Squadron. Now, the 509th Bomb Squadron in 1947 was the most elite hand-select unit in the world, exclusively responsible for the deployment of atomic weapons. This was the best of the best. So for these guys to mistake a common everyday weather balloon for something truly, off-world or whatever, it's just not going to happen. So Mac Brazel brings his debris into the field. They were like, holy shit, what is this? This is insane. And Jesse Marcel and one other guy go out to this guy's ranch. It was an overnight expedition. It's extremely remote. I've been there. And they come upon an area the size of, I think it was 10 football fields or bigger, of this completely unidentifiable material. Like there were I-beams with hieroglyphic-like structures on it. There were foil that you could not destroy with a blowtorch or sledgehammer material. You could crumple it up and it would take shape again. They were like, oh my God, like this is unbelievable. And they put out the headline that they recovered a flying saucer. They loaded up this debris in a I think it was a B-29 bomber, and Jesse Marcel, and I think it was Colonel DuBose, and a few others were going to fly it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which at the time was the Foreign Technology Division. So anything foreign would go there for an analysis. But they had a quick stop at Fort Worth. Now the story was out. They announced it to the world. This is happening. And when they arrived in Fort Worth, there was an explosion of media on the tarmac. And General Roger Ramey walked up because the media was trying to talk to Jesse Marcel, an intelligence officer who has the debris on the B-29, just sitting right there. And General Ramey walks up to Marcel and says, you keep your mouth shut, you let me handle this. And he grabs debris from an everyday weather balloon, stages a press conference, throws the stuff on the ground, and they have to pose with the fake debris, which is not what's on the airplane on the tarmac right outside. And the story was killed. But 2 out of 3 of those people, and of course half the town of Roswell, came forward on the record saying that the original press release was accurate and that what you're looking at was just an everyday weather balloon, and that the story was killed, and that DuBose came forward on camera, and Jesse Marcel came forward. Jesse Marcel's son, who handled the debris, came forward. People that were involved with the initial press release came forward. I mean, there was hundreds of witnesses. Hundreds of witnesses.
When you say it was just an everyday weather balloon, is that the assertion for Roswell, that it was just an everyday weather balloon?
Well, now they say it's Project Mogul, but Project Mogul at the time was exactly the same weather balloon, just a bunch of them strung together. There was nothing exotic about Project Mogul at the time. Now later, 10 years later, there was a different neoprene or some other material, but at the time, Project Mogul was exactly the same weather balloon that you're looking at on the floor, except it was a bunch of them tied together.
And then what is the exotic material that we believe was recovered from the Roswell incident?
Well, it was like I was explaining earlier, you've got material that it's foil-like. Jesse described it as you could hold it in your hand, you couldn't feel it. It was so light, and you could crumple it up, and it would magically take form again. But then there were these weird like I-beams and with like purple I-beams with like hieroglyphics and
yeah. So like what? But what have we done with that? We have had 80 years to analyze that. Why aren't we making this material?
I don't know. I don't know what we've done with it. I have no idea. But I did interview a colonel. He's been somewhat a controversial figure. His name is I've got his book actually right here, which I got. It's called The Day After Roswell. Philip Corso. He claims to have seen the bodies. There was a book that came out in '97. It was rushed to print because of all the circus around the 50th anniversary of Roswell, and there were some discrepancies in the book. And based on those discrepancies that were done from his publisher or co-producer, this guy Bill Burns, they've kind of tried to debunk him, but apparently he saw the bodies, and he claims, I don't know for sure, he claims that some of this was seeded into different companies that developed the technology that led to. I'm just telling you what he claims. I don't know this to be fact. I don't know, but he claims that it was microchips and super tenacity fibers and things of that nature that made their way into the general public. But again, I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Well.
But there's a lot more to Roswell than one might expect. And I could go on and on about the witnesses, but what the official explanation contradicts every single firsthand witness that I've met and heard on camera.
I just find it interesting, Stephen, that you haven't wanted to go down this rabbit hole super deep, because you like to go down certain rabbit holes, but for some reason not this one. Is that like why? Obviously everyone has their own thing, but
yeah, I mean, there's a concept called God of the Gaps, where there are some atheists will argue that religious people basically use God to fill in gaps in human knowledge. As the gaps close, God's explanation for things becomes narrower and narrower until he's only explaining the things that can never be proven by science. I feel like there's almost like an alien of the gaps argument, where all of these phenomena are alien in nature, and then when we research almost all of them, it turns out that almost every single one has not been all of them have not been extraterrestrial in nature. There are still a few that we can't explain. Like Shermer, I think, was explaining earlier that there's going to be some unexplained phenomena that we just can't get a handle on. We just, for whatever reason, want to be able to explain it. And it feels like most of the extraterrestrial investigations kind of start and stop there. Like the idea that we've had for 80 years some extraterrestrial material in our possession, and we haven't been able to break it down, analyze it, rebuild it. No other country in the world has called us out on it. No Edward Snowden leaks. No Donald Trump gets into the presidency and asks questions about it and figures out what's going on. No private corporation. No academic institution. No foreign government's intelligence. Nobody is. Well, but
that's not true. You see, what you're doing right now. No, what you're doing is
you're 99% wrong on everything you just said.
Okay.
Because the people have come forward. It's like it's not that.
President George W. Bush, let's see, Clinton talked about it. Carter talked about it. I interviewed Gerald Ford about it. Roswell's been leaking out since the 40s.
Wait, so if I were to ask, you said George, so if I were to look up like George Bush quotes on extraterrestrial stuff, what would George Bush have said?
So you'll hear different comments, like President Carter said he looked into it during his administration, wasn't happy with the answers he was getting. Ford says basically the same thing, that he pushed for congressional hearings because he felt the Air Force's explanation of swamp gas was ridiculous and it contradicted the firsthand witnesses. Clinton said he looked into it during his presidency. George Bush, during his campaign, made comments on it that he was going to try to get to the bottom of it. Trump talked about it. His son talked about it, Roswell.
Obama and Hillary talked about it. This was the
When you say
I have
talked
letters
about
from
it, though,
Hillary.
like
Well,
I'm
well,
saying
if-
discussions relating to the evidence that there might be extraterrestrial things. Not
Well,
like
I mean,
mentioned.
It goes
being-
pretty deep with
it's being
Hillary.
talked about, and there are intel insiders that have also talked about it that have also come forward. Believe me, there have been plenty. It's just that the disinformation campaign was so effective, and I can explain to you how that all came about. After the White House, on 2 consecutive weekends in July of 1952, was buzzed with UFOs, and military aircraft, just like the case with David Fravor, were scrambled to intercept these unknowns. They were surrounded, and they exhibited a technology that was just light years advanced. They had a press conference. It was the biggest press conference since the end of World War II. And the intel side put together a sort of intellectual think tank, and they came to the conclusion that you can't deny it, but you can adopt the policy of ridicule. And that was done in 1953, and it was a very effective campaign.
Yeah, if you look at Bill Clinton and Hillary both getting interviewed on Jimmy Kimmel, actually, those are really fascinating interviews because, and Obama's as well.
President Obama.
They all three of them take it very seriously when they're talking about it, and they both say that, like, they all say we want to look into it. We're trying to look into it, and they make it seem like they tried and hit walls.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, are the walls because it's extraterrestrial, or the walls because there's some like security reason, right? Like,
right, but that's what's crazy. It's like you have these presidents or like first
but that's
ladies.
it's
or,
not that
like,
crazy. Like, for instance, I could be wrong, but like, wasn't a huge part of Obama's campaign ran on shutting down Guantanamo Bay, and I don't believe he touched it. Right?
Yeah, right away as soon as he got elected, he said he was going to shut it down.
Yeah, I thought that was a really big point, especially because of how unpopular Iraq was and everything. But I'm pretty sure he got in there and nothing, right? But was it just because he broke a promise, or was it maybe the aliens are holding Guantanamo, or was it just that, like, when you get into your press, you're like, fuck, like, there's other shit going on here, I can't really say anything, or like to probe in this area, like, it's obviously an extraterrestrial, but it is intelligence related or military related, and these applications can't really be discussed publicly, right? Like that could be just as plausible an explanation, and it's happened with other things too. So.
Well, Destiny, I gave you the primary reason for secrecy, and I remember interviewing one of the intellectual heavyweights on the topic, Jacques Vallée, quite some time ago. Mm-hmm. And I said, because I was always baffled, like, why would any governing body cover up what could be the biggest discovery of our time? It didn't make any sense to me. I was like, why? Why? That was one of the biggest issues I had with this story. And it's like, I had this general tell me one time, like, kind of laughing at me, like, you silly little kid, you don't understand how things work. I'm like, what do you mean I don't understand? Like, isn't this the biggest, or wouldn't this be the biggest revelation? Isn't this the story that we're all waiting for? Like,
it's the level of like Copernican.
Yeah.
evolution.
And he goes, that's not how we see it. We have a problem. We have something flying around in our skies that we can't explain or control, that fly rings around our fastest jets. We don't know who it is, where it comes from, or what it wants. And if those objects, like the Tic Tac that Fravor interacted with, had like a Russian or Chinese flag on their body, I'm going to say tail because they don't have any tail, it would be all hands on deck. Like, it would be the biggest crisis ever. And so that's, people want to know why the secrecy. Well, that is a huge reason why the secrecy. It's more of a question of what they don't know than what they know.
Do you think that society would freak out if they came out and told us, Stephen?
Yeah, but I feel like it would be in the best way. But I feel like we do. It's kind of a sad facet of humankind, but we do really well when we have something to unite against. So I feel like an alien presence would be a pretty good way to bring the world together to solve some problems. I don't know if you guys have read. You must have. If you're in this era, you've read Ender's Game, right?
I haven't actually.
Oh no.
I've had it in my books.
You
I had it
guys
in my
talk
book.
about
I had it in my
research.
books.
Have you ever read Ender's Game? No, but I'm trying.
Science fiction?
Yeah,
or-
yeah. I'm half
I
joking.
don't read science fiction.
Sure.
My life is science fiction.
Sure, okay. I'm glad you made the joke. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, but I was gonna say in Ender's Game, the that's kind of the part of the whole first book is once they found aliens, all of Earth unites. But like as soon as the aliens are defeated, everybody's looking at turning on each other again. So no, I think that some kind of shared event like that would be a phenomenal experience, or it would cause all of Earth to collapse in and itself because every conspiracy theorist, every Nostradamus worshiper, every religion would suddenly collapse in on itself and people would go crazy. So, who knows? But it would be really interesting. I'll say that.
Well, wasn't it nice, you guys, to see the Democrats and Republicans working together during that? I don't think, Destiny, you say you saw little tidbits of the congressional hearings?
Yeah, I saw the one. I know that people freaked out over the non-biologics one, where I don't remember who was asking the questions, but they were asking them over and over again, like, what did you see? What was it? Was there extraterrestrial?
When you follow up, watch the AOC clip. I think it's interesting, like how seriously she's taking it with the private contractors, because she's been on oversight committees that have like already experienced and witnessed military contractor abuse. So like that's the area that she's really focused on, and it's pretty refreshing.
I was really refreshed to see the two. Like, thank God, please. Is that what it takes? UAP, UFOs to get us to work together? Like, can we put down our differences and focus on a common goal? Like, can we focus on what matters to us, we the people?
Apart from the outcome of like whatever it is, even just uncovering the misappropriation of funds in the Pentagon, and I mean, like that is such a huge story. If there's funds being siphoned out on like a mass scale, and that's why the Pentagon keeps failing their audits. Like for the past decade, they can never pass an audit. So,
wait, I thought the reason why is because you can't audit into the Pentagon for obvious reasons.
No, I'm pretty sure that they have to report their financials.
I'd have to look this up again, but because people say that a lot, but
they do. It's a little bit of.
You guys are making me realize I should have plugged in my mic. Sorry.
You sound fine.
Okay, well I've got a mic with a popper stopper, but it's got a USB. I need to get the converter because my new laptop doesn't have a USB connection. So
dude, I'm dealing with the exact same stuff. You have to get like the splitter for all of the USB-Cs. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
I've just been lazy, but I got to do that because you guys sound so good, and I'm sure my audio is terrible compared to you.
I mean, I'm looking at a CNBC 2021 why the Pentagon failed another audit. I mean,
wait, who? What was that? What?
It's just CNBC why the Pentagon failed another audit. It's from 2 years ago, so it's I don't know exactly what it's talking about, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just reading, and I could be wrong. This is something I briefly looked at before, but I'm just reading one paragraph of an NPR story in 2021. Despite having trillions of dollars in assets and receiving hundreds of billions in federal dollars annually, the department has never detailed its assets and liabilities in a given year. For the past 3 financial years, the Defense Department's audit has resulted in a disclaimer of opinion, meaning the auditor didn't get enough accounting records to form an assessment. So my understanding was like the failure of the audit wasn't that like trillions of dollars are going missing. It's that they're not able to complete that audit as much as they want, as much as they'd
it's
like
unknown if it's missing. Maybe
yeah,
it's not.
yeah. Not to say, by the way, that there is no waste or fraud. I'm sure there probably is some. It's not like the whole budget is like disappearing into a black hole or whatever. Right?
David Grush said that he knows exactly how it's done, how they've escaped oversight. He was like,
he used an acronym. It was like IZAP or something.
I remember. Yep, I know. Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. The little specifics that he dropped, like, do you just make you want to research it?
He's a physicist. I actually talked to another Intel guy that I'm in contact with who feeds me information. Someone that I actually tracked down and begged for the better part of 20 years to get him to meet with me. And this individual said that David Grush is one of the smartest, most qualified individuals, and that they never anticipated that he was going to become a whistleblower.
Oh well, he must have been playing Jedi mind games on them for years, because he was trying to get access to all the information and just interviewing all these people and trying to get in, and he got denied ultimately.
Could you imagine placing yourself? I mean, a movie needs to be made about.
I was just thinking, Christopher Nolan, please take this up, please.
Yeah, because look, I know what it's been like for me when I meet with witnesses. Like, for instance, I have a hard time when I tracked the guy down that allegedly drove the alien around Military X in Brazil. Remember, we identified this individual like a long time ago, and made great efforts for about a decade to just get this individual to meet with us. But anyway, I got to look him in the eyes, hear his story, and I had a really hard time reintegrating back into society because I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, I think I just met a guy who drove an alien around. Like, how do I not talk about this? Imagine David Grush, with the top clearances that he had, meeting 40 people that were directly involved on alien spaceships. Just imagine, whether you believe it or not, Destiny, but imagine for a moment what that must have been like for Mr. Grush to meet with over a 4-year span. He was fulfilling his obligation. That's what they put him there to do, right? And he starts to uncover this, and this thing starts to unravel, and he's finding the money trail, and he's finding this, and then he speaks to all these firsthand people that are working on alien spaceships. How do you process that? What do you do with that? How do you even go home and talk to your wife? You can't tell anyone. Like, just imagine what that would be like.
That would be pretty crazy. I definitely, would. I would agree. That would be very crazy. Yeah.
All right. Well, any last thoughts, you guys?
I hope I'm wrong. I hope I have to pay you $1,000 because we get photographs of aliens or alien spacecraft or something.
Okay, wait. Let's clarify that before we go. So if in however
he says we're going to be in the same place today as we were a year ago.
Right, so we're picking a year. It's a year time frame.
Yep. So what's the date today, guys?
What is your threshold, Stephen? What do you need? And make it reasonable.
So I actually bet somebody in my subreddit about this exact same thing. I should just find the terms of that bet. But it's that a credible person in the government, so not like a random lieutenant or colonel or something, but like a credible person that has a first-hand witness account or provides, I don't know if I would require there to be some evidence, but like a picture or some type of scientific analysis or something. Just something more than, in a year.
More than what we have today.
Yeah, in a year what we're going to have is, I'm going to guess there's going to be a couple more eyewitness people that are going to come out, and they're going to say okay, well, I worked with a guy who was on the craft and we saw these things, and that's going to be it. It's going to start and stop there, basically.
Okay, that's reasonable. James, you're comfortable with that?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, I've got the distinct advantage of being in touch with all these intel folks, and you do not. So I know what's coming.
Then, yeah.
So it's gonna be easy peasy lemon squeezy, baby.
I hope I'm wrong. So yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. No, that's the best possible bet to lose. To be honest, it's like
I'm thinking
the best
Chateau
possible
Lafitte.
information.
I'm thinking Chateau Lafitte. I've always wanted to taste the Rothschild. I don't know. I'm thinking, what will $1,000 get me? We'll see.
Do you drink, Stephen?
Only when I want to get wasted, so not often.
Well, this might call for that. All right. You should watch the Phenomenon. Maybe we'll do this again sometime, and check out James' film, because it's a pretty good overall synopsis of the space. If you don't want to do the deep stuff, I would be curious your feedback on that.
Bill, are you trying to convert him?
I'm not even converted myself, but I'm obsessed with all of the material. I
don't get involved with any case ever and believe it. I don't. I didn't believe Rua. I didn't believe really Socorro. Definitely didn't believe Virginia. I had a hard time with the flyover of Washington, D.C. I mean, I could just go down the line. I'm not
100% convinced by anything, but your film Moment of Contact, I cried at one point during that film. I lean toward, it seems Occam's razor is that it's more likely to be true than not true. So I'm not taking a definitive stance, but that's where I sit on these things. It's I lean more towards it being more likely that it's true.
Well, more likely that extraterrestrials are true?
Not necessarily extraterrestrial, but some kind of phenomenon is occurring. It's too much. Too many individual credible cases. It seems.
God, if you don't mind, gentlemen, I would like to just take 30 seconds because I think this will help both of you, and it certainly has helped me because people always think that I have all the answers, and I just don't. I wish I did. I'm just on this journey myself, right? And I just happen to share the results of my research with the general public through my movies, and it's great. And but I'd have to say, if I was pinned down and I had to make a statement about what I felt would be the best explanation for what's happening, I would say this: there seems to be an omnipresent intelligence that has the ability to manifest itself in a whole bunch of different ways. It's nuts and bolts, but it's also psychic. It's global. It seems to interact with us, to read our minds. I can give you countless cases with pilots describing that to me, military pilots too. It has a sense of humor, I'm told, and that it's always one step ahead of us. And that seems to be why they call it the phenomenon, because it's not people
Meaning that's literally what they refer to it as internally.
Yeah, it's called the phenomenon. That's where the title came from. We came upon a government document from General Nathan Twining in 1947 where he says the phenomenon is real. It's not visionary or fictitious. It's the phenomenon, and it's global in nature, and it's around us, and it can manifest. That's why witnesses go, it just came out of nowhere, or it just disappeared. Boop, it was over here, then it was there. So that's the best, but that's it. I mean, there's so many unanswered questions. But I feel like what you were saying, Destiny, I keep calling you Destiny. It's your show, Destiny.
You can call me Steven. You're good. Yeah.
Steven, I'm sorry. Steven, is that it's so potentially paradigm shifting. This story could restructure the way we see ourselves in our place in the universe, if it's really true, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I've been around the world investigating the case, I know that it's real. The question is, what is it? And that, I feel like it's hard to walk away from.
That's how I approach it too. It seems like the base issue, even regardless of what the outcome is, so many sub issues become resolved by this issue getting taken care of. That's why I focus on it, because it just seems like the implications of it hit everything. So to not be giving it more attention seems like a little bit just backwards.
Yeah, it's if true, it's the biggest story of our time, right? The biggest story, no question. I think everyone could agree with that, and I'm convinced it is. So there we go. I can't walk away from it.
Cool. Thanks for coming, James. Where can people find you?
Well, I'm at James C. Fox on Twitter. It's my primary. I mean, that's what I do run that account myself. Other people run my Instagram and other things, but the Twitter, for the most part, is all me. 99% me. So at James C. Fox, and you can check out The Phenomenon for free on Tubi. You can check out Moment of Contact for free on Tubi. If you don't want the commercials, you can pay a couple bucks on Amazon or iTunes. If you do buy it, I recommend you get it from Vimeo or iTunes, because it comes with 2 hours of bonus material for the same price. And people always go, why didn't you tell me that? I bought it on Amazon and I got nothing. So I always let people know that.
Cool, man. Yeah, anyone find me, minds.com/Ottman. And yeah, thanks for having us, Steven.
Yeah, thanks, Steven. Appreciate it.
Fun chat.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
Peace, dude. Bye.
Peace out.
For so long, I was just this independent. Oh, what news organization are you with? Nobody. Oh yeah, we're not meeting. It was just we're not meeting with you. Come on. You know what I mean? Especially when I was in my 20s and even in my 30s. And nobody took me seriously. It was so when I ultimately got a yes from Senator Reid, I mean, that was such a big deal, and it almost fell apart like 5 minutes before it all was going down. And it doesn't matter. I could tell that story another time, but it was done. The interview was pretty much terminated, and I had to do damage control at the last possible minute. I remember George Knapp calling me. He goes, "I suggest," he's like, "someone in your crew, you know, really offended one of his aides, and my God, this, you know, you better do damage control. This interview's done. Like, he's not even going to show up." It's like, oh my God. But anyway, when Senator Reid arrived, it was like, man, a powerful force just walked in the room, right? He had like aides and security detail. And I mean, dude, you're in the presence of a powerful person, okay? Just not that many times in my life where I've like, whoa, the atmosphere just changed, right? When he walked in. And I had a very limited time with him. I was like 48 minutes, whatever it was. It was something like under an hour. This is it. I spent several hours getting all the cameras set up, the lighting set up, like everything perfect. I rearranged the books on the bookshelf. Like I wanted him to walk in, sit down, and roll camera, right? I wasn't going to waste 1 second. And I looked, and I remember being almost through the end of the time that we had, and I was like, shit, I have no B-roll of me with him. And I was like, Senator, would you mind terribly if I could shoot a quick B-roll? And he's like, you got 2 minutes. And so I told Dave, my DP, I was like, roll camera, don't worry about the audio. You know, we didn't have time. And so Senator Reid and I are walking down this hallway, and I figured, well, I might as well take advantage of this moment I have with him. Every second counts. And I was like, hey, and this is something I didn't think about asking him when we were sitting down. What was one of the more astonishing aspects that you uncovered during this 10-year investigation in UFOs at the Pentagon? And boom, he pops that right out. He goes, the fact that the incursions that are happening over our nuclear facilities and that they're turning these nukes off. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. It's got this admission of this aspect of the phenomenon from the former Senate Majority Leader. I mean, Harry Reid's a household name. I went back to the drawing boards. That moment for me was like, wow, right? Because I started thinking about, like, I'd heard these reports. Yes, I interviewed a launch control officer, Robert Salas, and I interviewed David Jacobs, I think it was, maybe a couple of others. But it was like, whoa, okay, I need to put a laser-like focus on this. So we went back to the drawing board. I think we edited for a whole year, and we worked with Robert who's the guy that wrote the book on Robert Hastings? Yeah, and Robert Hastings had like a heart issue that he was dealing with, and he's like, I think I have less than a year to live. You can have everything I've ever done. Boom, he sends it to me. And so I sifted through that, and I put together about a 10, 12-minute segment on UFOs and nukes for the phenomenon. That's how it happened.
It just blows me away how, information trickles out. And like for some people, the events that have happened this week have been totally earth-shattering, brain-melting, and it's like we've pierced the veil, and we're like, it's like we got the wedge in the door, we're going in, they can't stop the momentum now. And then there's kind of like a whole like major crowd that's also like meh. And it's so bizarre that like, people can have such different experiences.
Well, here, I'll give it. This is really funny. I was interviewing. I was gobsmacked by the 1997 massive. I really don't like to call it the Phoenix Lights because it's very offensive to the witnesses that I met with that saw the massive craft, and there were a lot of them, including the governor. And so I call it the massive flyover. And I interviewed this. Probably 5 or 6 women that were hospice workers, and they were describing, it was March 13th, 1997. I was in the house that they were in. We're out on the back patio, and it was, I think they said it was like 7:30 or something, maybe 8 o'clock, 7:30 p.m. And they're having tea, and they're discussing, their day, and all of a sudden, this massive floating city just floats right over the top of them, right? And they just froze. They had their little tea in their hand, and they looked up, and they were like, they said it took like several minutes. That's how big it was to pass over. You could see compartments in it and everything else. And what did they do? They went right back after it went over the top of them. Not one of them got up. Not one of them ran to grab their camera. Not one of them. You know why? They couldn't process it. And that's what's happening with the hearings with some people today. They couldn't process. They can't process. It can't be, therefore it isn't. Like your brain just like forgets about it, right? To me, it was inconceivable. It's like, how could you, why didn't you run in your house, grab your camera, jump in your car, chase after it, call the 911? Like, what the hell? No, they just right on the top. I mean, I had interviewed families that were lying on their backs, on their front lawns, expecting this thing to land, looking at the different compartments. And it was, they said, had they not looked up, they wouldn't even known it was there. That's how quiet it was. These massive, massive mile-long craft. Unbelievable.
Man.
You know, you meet enough of these witnesses and, you know, I mean, and then you hear some of the statements made, no offense to Michael Shermer, but some of those, you know, and you just think to yourself, you just have no idea what you're talking about. You haven't gone into the field and talked to the witnesses. You haven't gone around the world and met with generals and colonels and pilots and fighter pilots and radar operators. And you just don't know what you're talking about.
I think what happens is they lump all of that just into the bin of anecdotal, and they don't have a relationship like you do with the personal experience, which is direct evidence in a sense. It's a different, you know, it's not physical evidence, but it is.
I mean,
you've looked into more people's eyes who have experienced it than probably anyone else on the planet. So it's like you have that experience, and it's not something you can learn.
I'm gonna make a poster of the 1990 Scotland. I'm sorry. Give me a second. I'll think of the name of the exact location. I'd heard about the photographic evidence years ago from Nick Pope, and you know, I interviewed Nick Pope when he was still working at the MOD. A number of films, and I'm like, Nick, what was the best case ever? And he talked about this photographic case. There were two hikers up in Scotland, north of Edinburgh. The why I can't remember the name of it right now is embarrassing, but it will come to me in a second. And there were a series of 6 photographs taken by 2 witnesses, broad daylight, of Calvine UFO incident in 1990. And he said it was like broad daylight, crystal clear, points of reference, a Harrier jet flying around it. These witnesses were incredibly credible. 6, you know, camera film, like real film, not digital, 1990. And I'd heard about this case, and I'd heard about these photographs, but they disappeared down the wormhole. Like as soon as the MOD got involved, they shut it down because those witnesses went to the local paper to go public with what they saw, right? And the paper tried to get a statement from the MOD and just, hey, could you have any explanation? And as soon as the MOD got a hold of those photographs, they never saw the light of day. However, there was one individual, Craig Lindsay, the RAF spokesperson at the time, and he kept that print. And I waited over probably 20 years to see that print, and I got to hold that print in my hand just a couple of weeks ago. And wow, you know, when you see that, why that disappeared, why all the other 5 of those photographs disappeared, because it was impossible to explain.
So that's coming out in your next film?
Yes. I interviewed Craig Lindsay. I interviewed David Clark, who found Craig Lindsay. David Clark did all the legwork. That guy's amazing. And found one print that was kept from 1990, almost by accident, by the RAF spokesperson, this guy, Craig Lindsay. And man, wow. Now I know why Nick Pope, you know, immediately went to that case, because that case was, you know, was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking through headlines about UAP hearings, and it is just overwhelming. Like the whole mainstream is in for the journey at this point. I mean, everywhere, they're all positive headlines. Everyone seems to be saying, just give us the information. I'm not,
Well,
we're not seeing the skepticism out of the mainstream anymore.
Okay, well, I mean, I saw a couple of reports, one with the BBC. It was okay. I was disappointed. It was okay. And then I saw another one on CNN, and that one made me want to, I mean, the tongue in cheek, the look on the woman's face. I was like, oh, please. Oh, God. I was,
Right, but it's not as bad as it has historically been. Like,
well, here's the thing, okay? Could you just take 1/50th of the resources and journalists and put that towards investigating that you would normally investigate the sexual peccadillos of a president? I mean, what they went after with both Trump and Clinton for, you know what I mean? Like, first of all, like if you took 1/1000th of the effort and budget that the media put towards David Grush's claims, trying to get the ICIG to make a comment, like,
You're right.
dig deeper, do something, please.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
guys have the resources.
And
I'm
I think
one
that
little guy,
in
like-
News Nation just proved how viral you can go putting money into this. I mean, they
News
like
Nation
they're,
is the News Nation. It will go down in history as
Mhm.
being one of the media outlets that really poured some resources into this, because the payoff is huge. This could be the biggest story in modern history.
who owns them?
Good question. I know a gentleman, Scott. Scott Carlin, former head of HBO, is friends with the owner, and Scott Carlin is the one that pitched News Nation
And got the whole thing in.
and got the whole thing.
Wow, that's so monster. I mean, that was such a win for them with Ross and
Yeah.
David and
Washington-
you've been on their mind. It looks like Nexstar Media Group owns them. I don't know who.
Okay, I was on there, and then you know, I was in touch. I was interviewing Leslie Kane
Uh-huh.
in Washington D.C. when she was talking directly with Dave Grush, and Dave Grush's lawyer, which I believe is a former ICIG himself. I think so.
Are Keen and, you know, maybe even yourself and like so there are firsthand witnesses who are talking to journalists now
Well, I don't know
who are
about.
correlated to Grush.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I'm in touch with some of them. You
Mhm.
know, I'm in touch with firsthand. I mean, whew, that individual story. I put the individual on camera, and when the time is right, and under the right circumstances, it will come out. But this individual, and along with others, I'm told, I just spoke to this individual yesterday. This individual is going to pursue the same avenue that Mr. Grush did, and that is, I believe there's a process in order to get, the immunity from the NDA and all that stuff.
Right.
I think you have to fill out. It's an application with the ICIG, and then there's a review process. It has to be signed off. Blah blah blah.
Dopser, the whole, like, because the Dopser thing, which is what enabled, it's not like they're clearing his statements, but, you know, he had to put it through his statements through Dopser so that they could tell him, yes, you can say this to the media. It does not compromise national security.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a process, and I don't know how long it takes, but my understanding is it's not particularly quick. Now, I also know that that's to go public, but they can also be taken into a skiff and reveal, like, you know, the individuals that I have met with, one in particular, was like, well, I told them where the locations were and the names of the programs and where the money came, you know, all the names.
So you've been in a skiff.
I have not been in a skiff. I was told the information. Someone's been trying to call me over and over and over.
Oh,
and over.
we can,
Okay.
let's wrap up. Let's wrap up.
Yes. Well, okay. Yeah. So, well, sorry. So, the information that was revealed to me were not the specifics that were revealed in the skiff and potentially revealed to. So, in other words, there are firsthand witnesses queuing up right now today to go through the same process that David Grush went through. They will be revealing all those details that the general public will not, to Senate Intel and all that. But that's okay. It's part of the process. You have to educate the members of Congress, people that represent us first, right? And then they're going to trickle that out to us. I mean, the fact that News Nation got Rubio to admit that he met with firsthand witnesses, it's a big deal. okay, well, let's, that's.
And it's so funny how casual it was. It's like you get them on, if you get these people on an interview for 10 minutes, like they'll drop little bombs once in a while.
Yes.
And that's like, it doesn't always take like years of deep digging. Like sometimes if you just interview the people.
Yeah. I bet you Washington Post is regretting the fact they passed. They didn't pass exactly. They were going to publish. I remember when Leslie was in negotiations, then that was sort of top secret. And, I was listening to Leslie talking to Dave Grush's lawyer, and I was listening to David Grush's voice on a speakerphone when we were coming out of a parking lot and talking to another intel guy. And I can tell you right now that he was terrified for his life. I heard it. I was like, shit, this is some X-Files stuff going on right now. This is nuts. And some of the things that I heard, I was like, Jesus Christ, is that true? Could that possibly be true? Okay, one thing I've learned in this phenomenon, in this field, is to suspend judgment and listen, because you can't just have a knee-jerk reaction and dismiss something because it sounds too crazy. I've learned firsthand, Virginia, Rua, okay, Roswell. So.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming. This was a blast. We'll do it again sometime. You already told people where to find you, so I'll let you go. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks so much, Bill. And I know this goes without saying, but I cannot ever thank you enough for basically getting Rogan's attention on that film, because it's not about me, but it's about that case, and to get eyeballs on that case. That was a huge. That was just a huge boost, and I'm forever indebted to you for that, sir.
Thank you for the work that you do. That just like it just has to be spread. So it was no favor, man. It's really like amazing work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rock on, brother.
We'll be in touch.
Yep.